All right, so this is kind of crazy about the Dutch people. In fact, they're world famous for just being brutally honest. And I kind of love that. They don't beat around the bush. So I remember we were visiting this lady with my companion and this other lady, Sister Hasenleger. And she's kind of a chunky person. And this lady, they were strangers. This lady looked at Sister Hasenleger and said, wat ben jij flink dik? What, you're rather fat. And Sister Hasenleger just laughed and said thank you. And we moved on to the discussion. They just are very frank and honest about their feelings. So you always know where you stand with the Dutch people. Not only are they frank and they're honest, they're hardworking. They're also very frugal. There's a saying which they always talk about saving their spaarzegels. They don't like to spend frivolously. They're very netjes. That's a word in Dutch which means they're very... everything has its place. So the Dutch, they make sure everything's organized. You drive around and you're either on your bike or in your car, and everything's organized. The streets are cleaned up. The Dutch people love, in the mornings, they'll, at least on a weekly basis, they'll hang out their bedding just to air out from their windows. As you peer into their windows, they have these huge windows. They have lovely curtains, and they'll have their plants on the front, and everything's organized in their houses. There's nothing, I wouldn't say sacred, but everything's out and open. So as you look in their houses, I mean, it's not like you do that just to peer in, being nosy, but as you walk by their houses, you have lovely plants. Everything's organized in their houses. It's a very Dutch thing. Okay, so another thing you never want to do is really come unannounced to someone's house. Not that they won't entertain you or accept you to come in, but you want to have your agenda. You always want to make sure that you schedule an appointment. It's just part of the Dutch culture. Other cultures sometimes, especially in Hawaii, you can come in, relax, and you don't have to come in, you don't have to have an appointment. But in Dutch culture, not just in business culture, but just visiting with friends and family, it's important to have an appointment. And if you don't have an appointment, they're not upset, but it's kind of looked frowned upon. When you're riding bicycles, no one wears a helmet. You have bike lanes, you have bike traffic lights. So it's really a great thing. I mean, they've had this since the 40s and 50s, these bike lanes. So it's a country that's based on not just public transportation, but also on bikes. I mean, people, per household, you could have 3-5 bikes. Now, the Dutch families aren't very big. They have maybe 1 to 2 kids. Culture-wise, they love learning about other people, and they don't mind you talking about your culture. And if you learn their language, they appreciate that, but they love speaking English. In fact, I remember even on my internship when I spoke Dutch, they would still ask me, hey, let's speak in English. I'm like, nee, ik ben hier om Nederlands te praten, dus daarom moet ik Nederlands spreken met u. But they still want to speak English. And not that they want to show off, but no one speaks Dutch except for the Dutch people. And anyone who's actually learning Dutch are maybe babies or missionaries who are going to the Netherlands. The Dutch people, they've had, for centuries, they've learned to speak other languages. So they speak German, they speak French, they speak Spanish, and of course English. It's no problem for them to speak English with you. Now the older generation, maybe people in the 70s, 90s, their English isn't that great, but they can speak it. But the generation now and people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, English is not a problem at all. My first day riding my bicycle, my Dutch was just terrible. I said hi to this kid. I'm going to say he's maybe 10 or 12 years old. And he looked at me, he said, U moet meer duidelijker spreken. So he told me, you must speak more clearly. And so not only are the adults just frank about their feelings, just kids are too. And I just realized, oh boy, I need to speak Dutch better. It was a crash course in Dutch. So other interesting things about the country, like I said, you have bike lanes, you have bakeries, you have also just little stores that are selling their little wares, whether it's stationery, magazines, you have secondhand stores, you have bike stores everywhere. So here we have in the States, we have car dealerships, used car dealerships, brand new car dealerships, every so many miles. But in the Netherlands, every block, almost every other block, you have a bike store to help repair your bike, to sell bikes. Obviously, I'm brown, and when I lived in the Netherlands in the 80s, I had hair. And I wouldn't say it was an afro, but it wasn't straight. It was kind of a bush. And I remember the first few months in the Netherlands, someone looking at me around Christmas time and saying, "Oh, the broer van Zwarte Piet." And what that translates is, "Oh, look, it's the brother Black Pete." Black Pete, Zwarte Piet, is Santa Claus's helper. So you have Sinterklaas, and then his helper, he's on a horse, Sinterklaas is. He comes from Spain, and he brings his helper, Zwarte Piet. And he's a gentleman from, he's a Moor. And so he's a black guy in this clothing from the... Oh boy, he kind of looks like a court jester in a way without the hat. He has an afro. Nowadays, though, it's blackface with an afro. So I'm not sure if you might have to edit this, but there's a controversy. It's very controversial now because blackface here in America, that's very racist. In the Netherlands, it's over the last, I'm going to say 10, 20 years, it's been kind of a controversial subject. So now, Zwarte Piet, he has now different colors. He could be rainbow colored. He could be yellow, pink, whatever. But they're trying to, it's frowned upon now to have the black face and the afro. So there's a controversy now of having the regular Black Piet, Zwarte Piet, and the new up-and-coming Black Piet. And so I don't mind either one. I can see the controversy. But yeah, I was called Zwarte Piet, the broer van Zwarte Piet. That's just kind of the fun culture of the Netherlands. I was never offended by it. Oh yes, so when I did my internship, I was talking to some lady about singing with all my heart. And I said, ik zing met al mijn hart. And she said, no, you actually want to sing met volle borst. So you sing with all your chest. And another thing that I had said the times had just changed, so we could sleep in an hour. So this is in October, and I said to my friends, I said, het is leuk om in te slapen. And they kind of laughed at me, because when you say inslapen, that means to put yourself to sleep, or to kill yourself. And so they really said, you really should say, het is leuk om lekker uit te slapen. So there's a difference. So this is 1986, and we went to a bakery, and I said to this lady, mag ik wat besneden brood hebben? And she kind of just smiled at me, because if you mispronounce sliced bread, instead of saying sliced bread, which is gesneden brood, I said besneden brood, and she just kind of smiled. And besneden brood means circumcised bread, and she didn't rip on me. She just kind of laughed. She kind of smiled at me. But yeah, the correct pronunciation of sliced bread is gesneden brood, not besneden brood. There is a ice skating marathon called the Elfstedentocht. And the Elfstedentocht, it takes place in kind of Leeuwarden, which is the northern part of the Netherlands. And so there are a lot of, these cities are connected by canals. In order for this ice skating marathon to happen, It takes about, the ice has to be about a foot thick for a few weeks for them to actually hold this, because you have hundreds, if not thousands of people participating. So I just remember it was the two coldest winters from 1985 to 1986. In order for them to have this Elfstedentocht, the ice has to be so thick, and they held it 2 years in a row. I'm from Hawaii, and it never freezes unless you're at the top of Haleakala or Mauna Kea, where they actually ski. But they had it 2 years in a row, and since my mission, they've only had it one time. That was in 1997. So it was extremely cold. I remember riding my bicycle on ice and falling several times. I remember right behind this gentleman, and he fell down on his bicycle because of the ice. And then I was carrying, I don't know why I didn't keep it in these cans, but I should have. I had this fruit cocktail, and I had it in this pan, and I knew I was going to fall down just because he fell down and it was very slippery. So I fell down on my bicycle, but I held the fruit cocktail up, and it didn't fall, and it didn't spill, but there was just ice everywhere. In fact, if you wake up and you see sunlight in January, you know that you've slept past 6:30. I'm going to say it was 8 o'clock in the morning. We looked at our alarm clock. This is Groningen, and it was frozen. That's how cold it was. So we looked at our alarm clock. It was frozen. We looked outside. There's still snow and ice. But it was that cold. My alarm clock was frozen. I remember reading our scriptures, and you could see we were right next to the kachel, which is the furnace, and you could see a breath disappear into the furnace. That's how cold our particular apartment. I don't think everywhere was that cold, but in our apartment, that's how cold it was. So I haven't really practiced that, just because I always wanted to focus on my best Dutch accent, so I'll try my best. So, ik heet Keenan. Ik kom uit Amerika vandaan. En ik woon hier in Nederland al 2 jaar. En ik kom uit Hawaii. Ik ben Hawaiians, Filipijns en Chinees. And that's... I wish I could speak worse, but I'll speak it in how I would say that in Dutch. Ik heet Keenan, ik kom uit Hawaii vandaan. En ik ben hier al in Nederland voor 1 jaar of 2. Eigenlijk, ik liep stage bij Philips in Nederland in 2004. En ik kom uit Hawaii vandaan. Ik spreek Nederlands, een klein beetje Nederlands. En ik ben Hawaiians, Chinees, ook Filipijns. The pronunciation, the trick for me is just to mimic what the Dutch are doing. And you you have to really, really, really listen. And I would suggest reading Dutch out loud and asking the people on the trains or your neighbors how to pronounce things, because they're the experts. They speak great Dutch, obviously. And they're very learned. I mean, these people are not only just, they speak Dutch, like I said, they speak English, French, some German, some Spanish. Speaking it out loud and not feeling afraid to make a mistake, and not feeling afraid to be a fool, because you're going to make mistakes. You're either going to make your mistakes, 1,000 mistakes now or later. Just get it over with. And they are so happy to help you with your Dutch. So I would try to mimic exactly how they pronounce things. You will get to know the Dutch world when you actually ask questions about them, when their lives. I remember, my landlady, she grew up in World War II, and her parents grew up in World War I. So they remember just the experience of being not taken over, but from another people, and so they remember the struggles of having to survive on little of anything, and they remember those experiences of actually helping each other. They had hamburger special, which is it's raw hamburger meat, and I can't remember what that is in English, but yeah, I took a bite of it and I couldn't eat it anymore. It has to be cooked thoroughly. Other crazy foods, I couldn't. Oh yeah, haring. Haring, coming from Hawaii where we eat poke, which is raw fish, and with onions on it and some other spices. You would think that I would love haring, but I couldn't eat haring. Yeah, I just couldn't put it down my throat. Just couldn't do it. It was too raw for me. But otherwise, I love Dutch food. I love all the breads, tijgerbrood, tarwebrood, all the cookies, speculaas. Oh boy, gevulde koekjes, everything. I couldn't stop eating. In fact, when I went back on my internship, every day I went to a bakery. I went and I knew that I only had 3 months. So I just tried to take advantage of as much bakery goods as possible. Favorite foods. I loved Indonesian food. Part of my cultural background, I'm Filipino, Hawaiian, Chinese, so I love Asian food. And then eating Indonesian food was great because you have this rice tafel and you have all these different dishes, and these people have been working all day to prepare this food. It's very spicy, hot, and yeah, so there's nasi goreng, there's bami, there's all these different items that they're preparing. Pinda sauce, which is a peanut butter sauce. It's very light and creamy and also a little spicy. So I love Indonesian food, and of course you have the Dutch food. You have erwtensoep, which is split pea soup. Different types of, there's dairy, there's all kinds of Dutch cheeses. Gouda. It's not Gouda, it's Goudse kaas. What else? You have yogurts. You have fla. I love fla. They're different. There's chocolate fla, chocolade fla, and fla natural. There's also, let's see, lots of different frites. And the different sauces. And the sauces are great. There's samurai sauce, which is really hot, spicy. There's ketchup, which is not really ketchup like we think of. It's more like a sweet soy sauce. You don't necessarily put it on fries, but also you can have it as part of maybe mayonnaise. And their mayonnaise is different from the American mayonnaise. So I interned in the Netherlands in 2004 with Philips Semiconductors. And my landlady, her name is Della. And Della's boyfriend at the time, his name is Gerard, and there was a dish called Zolt. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was made out of. It was kind of a clear gelatin with kind of a pink kind of meat. And I took a bite of it. It was okay. And then Gerard said it was pig head, pig brains. And I couldn't eat another bite after it. And interestingly, I eat Spam because I'm from Hawaii, and Spam is basically varken, which is, it's, thinking in Dutch, it is pig, it is pork. So I can eat Spam, but I can't eat Zolt. Not anymore, no. So I served from 1984 to 1986. My first city was Utrecht. Loved Utrecht. They have this downtown area which is very old, a Domtoren, which is a tower. This is, I don't know how old it is, but just beautiful. And then I went to Alkmaar, the cheese city, the Kaasstad. Very famous for their cheese market, Kaasmarkt. From Alkmaar I went to Breda, a smaller, just a smaller southern city. And after Breda I went to Maasluis, which is, you have they have Rotterdam, and then as you go more west to out to the English Channel, you also have other smaller cities. And so I went to Maasluis, which is just west of Rotterdam, and then from Maasluis I went to Nijmegen, which is kind of one of the battlegrounds of World War II with the German and the Dutch, and how the Americans and the English and other countries helped liberate the Dutch from occupation. And then from Nijmegen, I went to Groningen. And in Groningen, that's where I experienced bitter cold, where they had the 2 coldest winters in over 20 years, where they had the Elfstedentocht for 2 years, 2 years in a row. Same gentleman won the competition. Forgot what his name was, but he was a farmer. I remember living in Breda and how bad the snowstorm was. One of the snowstorms. I remember riding my bicycle over a canal, and there was this girl coming toward us, and there's snow coming down, and I just looked at her, and I just said one word, sterkte. And that word just says everything when you're going through some troubles. It just means much strength to you. It's just one word saying. And she looked at me and she said, sterkte back. I love that about the Dutch people. They're very short about certain comments. There's certain phrases. You just need to use one word and everyone knows what it means. Whether it's beterschap, gezondheid, sterkte, gezelligheid. Everyone knows what those words mean. And it's a great way to connect with people. So after Groningen, I went to Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, I loved the city. I just loved the vibe of it. Lots of different people. You have people from all over different cultures, countries. I remember going to a Turkish bakery and getting the pita bread. I remember going to this Dutch bakery. It was just a wheat bakery. And oh boy, people were lined up to get their bakery goods. And the members, the folks that lived there, actually owned the shop. They were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And their son had lived in Maui. So I was able to connect with him because he lived in Maui. I spoke Dutch, he spoke Dutch. And we were also able to speak the dialect in Hawaii, which is Pidgin. And of course, the Dutch people, they just love traveling all over the world. They just do. They've been doing it since, 1400s, 1500s? Not necessarily conquering the world, but having trade all over the world. Do you think about the Dutch East Indies? And that's from the Netherlands. And the reason why we think that people are from Holland is because most of those sailors were from Holland, South Holland. So instead of just saying, I'm from South Holland, they just would use Holland. Each city has a little dialect. I remember living in, I think it was Breda, and someone said the word for meat in Dutch is vlees, but they said either it was from Breda or Alkmaar, they said bixamenta, which resembles nothing like vlees. So each city has their own little flavor of their own little dialect. As you go more toward Belgium, of course, they don't have the hard g sound or the hard v sound. They have a soft g, and I can't say it because I really didn't live in Belgium. So instead of saying welke huis, they would say welk house in Belgium. Depending on the time of the year, you always want to bring at least a light jacket because it's going to rain. It's either going to pour on you or you're going to have a light drizzle. And it could be a little cooler. Even if it's summer, it sometimes can be cooler. So always bring a light jacket for the rain. I would definitely make sure you take some kind of bike tour. It's nice to take the tram or the bus, but to really know what Dutch people are experiencing, ride a bike. You'll see moms and dads with 1, 2, 3 kids on one bicycle. It's a great feat. And you'll see businessmen riding in their suits, talking on their cell phones, just like every American driving their car on their cell phones. Riding your bicycle, you always want to use your hand signals. We don't really do this in the Netherlands. If I'm going right, I'm using my right hand. If I'm going left, I use my left hand. If I'm stopping, I'm just pulling over to the right hand side. You always yield to the person on the right hand side. I never wore a helmet. No one wears bike helmets in the Netherlands, except if you're really training on your bicycle, but going back and forth from your house to your work. No one wears bicycle helmets except for the missionaries. But very safe. I've never saw anyone in an accident on a bicycle for my 2 years and 3 months, and 2 years on my mission, and then 3 months interning with Philips Semiconductors in Eindhoven. Don't be afraid to know that, to see and experience the Dutch people just Tell you like it is. I mean, if you're 6'10", they're gonna mention it to you. They will. If you're kind of loud and you're standing next to them in a line, they may tell you to quiet down. The Dutch, there's a famous saying that says, "Don't stick your head above the cornfield," and it basically means don't try to stick out. Don't try to bring attention to yourself. I wouldn't say you can't talk to people, be friendly. You just don't want to bring attention to yourself. And there's also another phrase that goes, normaal is wat je bent. So normal is who you are. Just try to be yourself. At the same time, don't try to stick your head above the cornfield. Frankly, I love their culture. I love even their crazy things. Their same-sex marriage, their taxes, all these things are maybe a little different, controversial from what me as an American might enjoy, not necessarily enjoy, might experience. But there was nothing except for Zolt that I didn't like or Hadi. But everything else I loved. I love their language. I love their culture. I love their history. In fact, I meet people here in the U.S. who are coming from the Netherlands. And when I tell them that, ja, ik kan een klein beetje Nederlands praten. Actually, I say it first of all in English. I tell them, yeah, I speak a little Dutch. And they're like, oh, let's try. And I tell them, ja, ik kan een klein beetje Nederlands praten. Ik woonde in Nederland voor een jaar of 2. En ik liep stage bij Philips, heel lang geleden. We just start speaking Dutch and we get to know each other better. And it's as if I've known these people forever. There's really nothing I dislike about the Netherlands except, and the Dutch people say this too, except for the cold, rainy weather. But that's a very Dutch thing to complain about the weather. So, even though I'm from Hawaii, and I love my Hawaiian background, I love my Asian culture, and I'm American, I love being American. Actually, if I could come back again, I would actually be a Dutch person because I just understand their culture, understand their language, understand even the people who are not Dutch, who are coming from other countries, whether it's Indonesia, Turkey, these other cultures or religions. I really like mingling with all of them because I'm a very curious person. I love learning about the different cultures. In fact, when my landlady, she was 75 at the time, so she's 85 now. Della, it was great learning about her upbringing, how her parents had to struggle during World War I and World War II, and also how her boyfriend at the time, Gerard, I remember he was talking about how when he was on his bicycle, this is World War II, and the Germans, they saw him on his bicycle and they motioned to him to get off his bike because everything was actually for the war effort. So he was really upset, but he gave his he had to give up his bicycle to the Nazis. And I remember also speaking with another gentleman. He's 75 years old and he's still playing soccer. He worked on the market and there in Eindhoven, and he sold cigarettes and he sold souvenirs. I got to know him and his grandson. Ik heet Keenan en ik ben ontzettend dankbaar dat ik in Nederland voor 2 jaar als zendeling voor de Kerk van Jezus Christus en Heilig in de laatste dagen, dat ik daar voor de mensen daar in Nederland diende. Ik vond het een voorrecht om niet alleen Nederlands te praten, maar ook van de geschiedenis, van het eten, van de cultuur, van de mensen te leren. Ik heb een heleboel vrienden daar in Nederland. En ik vond het een voorrecht ook mijn vrouw daar te brengen met mijn kinderen in 2001. En ik liep stage bij Philips in 2004 voor een maand of 3 in Eindhoven. En ik vind de mensen in Nederland ontzettend oprecht. Ze zijn eerlijk. Alles is netjes in Nederland. Alles heeft hun eigen plaats in Nederland. Ik kan niets tegen mensen in Nederland of hun cultuur te zeggen. Want ik vond het ontzettend leuk, heerlijk, gezellig daar in Nederland te zijn. En ik wil ook jullie laten weten dat Nederland een heel goed plaats is om te wonen, om te werken. De mensen werken hard daar. En ik hou van Nederland. En ik dank u voor het voorrecht om daar te wonen en te werken en met de mensen te spelen en ook te dienen. Dank u Nederland. Hup hup.